Excellent. Perfect.
Great.
So I'm going to give a quick intro about Boston Startup Week. I'm going to hand it off to Steven to do panel introductions, and then we'll be off and running. All right?
Sounds great.
Excellent.
And Rakeem, I told the rest of the people, the panelists, that I'm going to be going in the order of the document.
Okay, so does that mean I'm first?
Yes.
Okay, great.
No pressure, no pressure.
I'm feeling it. No, I'm good.
All right, guys, and we are off. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for another session at Startup Boston Week. If you're able to join some of our other sessions earlier, thank you so much. If you haven't, just know they are going to be recorded, or they are recorded, and will be available to the public sometime in November. I do want to let you all know that this session you're in right now is the Life Gives You Lemons session. If you were looking for one of the other Startup Boston sessions that were happening at exactly this time, please feel free to go to the agenda tab in your top left of the Goldcast platform here and join the session that you wanted to originally join. Also, if you have any questions for the panel, note that there are multiple ways to communicate. However, we would like you to focus on the Q&A tab. That is where Steven, our moderator, will be able to see your questions in real time. He may pull them in during the session or wait till the last 10, 15 minutes at the end, depending on the flow of the conversation. If you would by accident put something in the chat area, I will be moderating that area and we'll try to push you towards the Q&A session. That way, Steven can see your actual question itself. But with that, I would like to pass it off to Steven to offer a panel introduction. Steven?
Awesome. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And welcome, everybody, to the Life Gives You Lemon panel. Super excited to be here with such an esteemed group of panelists here to talk about how they have thrived through COVID and other challenges and really have grown as companies. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Steven Conwell. I'm a co-founder of Storied. And basically what we do is provide startups with resources that they need to grow. So super excited to be here. And just a little update about the panel. I want to keep this as conversational as possible. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A like Brandon said. I'll try and squeeze them in as time permits. But the panelists feel free to jump in even if you're not directed the question. But super excited to get started and like to introduce who's speaking today. Rakeem, I'll give it over to you.
Great, thank you. Hey everyone, my name is Rakeem Morrison, co-founder and CEO of Surge. We're building an open employment network for 80 million hourly workers. For employers, we're helping them find workers and retain workers. And for employees, we're building a platform that they can manage their skills, finances, and create much more fulfilling lives for themselves. And we're also hiring for 6 roles, so also go to our hiring website. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rakeem. Andrew, I'll kick it over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Lau. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Jellyfish. Jellyfish is the engineering management platform that helps large software engineering teams connect their work with the business. Just because we have a startup crew here, you could also think of it as doing for engineering what Salesforce did for sales, right? Provide that connection from the work that the team does to the larger business goals, right? We've been tremendously lucky during this time period, and we've been growing. We've grown from 20 people to 85 today, and so echoing Rakeem, yes, we're hiring. I'm sure all of us are here too. So, but I think that there's bright spots. I think we're going to talk about this today on this panel. But I think I'm lucky to be here with you all. Thank you. Thanks,
Andrew. Bozanka.
Hi, everyone. Bozanka Vitanova, co-founder and CEO of TeamLift. TeamLift is a team alignment platform. And what that means is if you've been working remotely for the past year and a half and you've been in meetings where the meeting ends and you're like, what the hell just happened? Or you think you understood what you're supposed to do, but then you start working on it and you realize that you didn't really understand anyone else, then you might want to give us a try. We make sure that everyone from the team is on the same page and rows in the same direction.
Great. Thanks so much. Take us home, David.
Morning, folks. David Berlin calling in from CIC Health, a sub-company of CIC Cambridge Innovation Center. Our primary focus is COVID-19 testing and vaccinations, very much born out of the pandemic, and working closely with schools and businesses to get their folks vaccinated, get their folks tested, and try to get us back to whatever we're trying to go back to.
I just want to thank Dave before we go on this. Like, your product is awesome. We use it at the company, and so thanks for keeping us all safe.
Absolutely, I do the same. I use it every week at work, so it's a lifesaver. Thanks so much. Awesome. Well, as I said, this is a really great group of panelists with a lot of diverse perspectives on the COVID pandemic and how they've shaped their companies to like Andrew mentioned, grow, to be quite the force in Boston. So I'll kick it over. We'll start with Andrew. How has COVID impacted your business?
I touched on it earlier. I think it's I think it's impacted all of us on a personal level first, right? I mean, what a tough year in so many dimensions. 18 months now in all these dimensions, both from a public health and social perspective. So I think, I think this session is called Lemons. There's a lot of lemons out there, right? That I think we've all gone through. So I think it's whatever I think any of us say, it's with deference to the situation. Oops, looks like we lost somebody. With deference to the whole situation that actually we've been living through here. But I think for us, like everybody, I think we spent the first couple months, after March, April, probably 3 months afterwards, trying to figure out like what I think what's going to happen with the world. And I think it was a moment, I think, that I'm sure all of you, just like a lot of probably have the same situation, which was it was a lot of lack of clarity around what's actually happening. And then, we've got tremendously lucky. I think we've grown. I think in 2020, we grew 5x on the business side, largely because of the fact that everybody went hybrid, everybody went remote. And I think our product became even more relevant given the changes in the workplace that have actually happened. And so we have, from a business perspective, tremendously benefited from that. And our business has grown, our team has grown, the opportunities actually happened. But again, back to the beginning, with deference to the complicated situation here, clearly we would never wish this on the world in any which way.
Definitely. And I'd love to hear how Lyft has been impacted by COVID.
I'll jump in here. So Raheem again. So the pandemic, the COVID has impacted the business in every single facet possible for us. Starting from the top here, when March 20.
The organizer is going to provide you with your speaker magic link. When you put this magic link in your browser, you're going to end up on the event page. From there, you can click enter event at the bottom right.
Awesome. Okay. David.
Kim, do you want me to jump in the meantime?
Sure.
Thanks. CIC, Cambridge Innovation Company, is a real estate company. We have office space across the world. And so when COVID hit and people stopped going to the office, we had to really think not just what could get people back to the office, but for all of our wet lab spaces that we operate across the country, what's going to get people to get back safely. And so in March last year, everyone was leaving the office except for the people working in the wet labs who couldn't leave the office. So the question wasn't how to get these people to turn their homes into wet labs. It was how to get people to feel safe coming into the workspace. And so we stood up small scale testing for these companies. We did it really quickly and really efficiently, so much to the point where a bunch of the people we were testing started saying, hey, we actually have some private schools that our kids go to that really need testing. This was the fall last year. And then we worked closely with the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard to stand up and scale up COVID testing. And it slowly stepped away from how do we get our workers back into the office safely to how do we get our workers' families to be able to go back to school so that they can focus on work. And then it expanded to how can we get people across the country to be able to do this. I think from a perspective of CIC, the real estate company, it's still bouncing back and people are still slowly coming back to the office, but it's really complementary services. If people are not coming to the office, it's because there's surge in COVID cases. So the need for vaccinations and testing is going to be so much more important. And so we were able to keep the CIC company floating, the real estate company alive because of the extreme effort by the CIC health team, and also vice versa. So you have two companies that are complementary in nature that really financially are able to help each other during those downtimes. And we did a great job of doing testing. So the state came to ask us about vaccinations. So it's shifted away from how do we get our workers tested to how do we get our workers vaccinated. And especially with the rise of Delta, we grew our company last year from 10 employees last April to hundreds of employees and thousands of subcontractors. And now ramping back up to be able to serve people as we do fall testing and as boosters do come out, what is our role and how can we best help people?
Thanks so much, David. Rakeem, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, thank you. The training video came on anyways. So it was, describing a bit what we do as a company. So we're Open Employment Network. Before the pandemic, before COVID, specifically before April 2020, what we did is on-demand labor for W-2 employees. And all the people that we had on our platform were janitors. They were janitors that cleaned commercial buildings. And all of the buildings closed in April 2020. And as a result, we lost virtually all of our revenue. And what we decided to do, and there's a couple of questions later on this, but we decided to pivot. Instead of having on-demand labor, we decided to pivot and having permanent labor, permanent in terms of full-time and part-time roles. And that's the pivot that we made in starting to think about in April and then really hitting the ground with it in July. But around that time too, there was also a series of layoffs that we had to make since we weren't able to sell our product. Our business model relied on buildings being opened and they weren't opened around COVID. As a result, we had to make a hard decision, tough decision to let go and furlough about a quarter of our team, the sales team. And that was tough. I never had to do that. It was a very, very shaky period for quite some time. Fortunately, with the pivot, we were able to get many more employers on the platform that we had before, especially considering everyone was off of work. We were able to get a big population of people to restaff these workplaces for those full-time roles, those part-time roles. And from then, we've been able to grow the team to the same size as we had it before. There are a couple more things that we did and accomplished in the past year, but I also have to say that for a bit later.
Zaka, do you have anything to add to that?
For me, it was more of a personal story. Pre-COVID, March 2020, I had been working together with my co-founder on the technology behind TeamLift for a while. But I had many other personal plans. I had my own consulting company. I had a few kind of opportunities that were coming up. I had quite some travel plans. So my schedule was packed. And then all of a sudden, everything got canceled. And initially, it's really scary because I had some of those places was where my income was coming from. It was how I lived. I would never really stay in one place that long. So it was very, I don't know, unnerving in a way because you've had a way you live your life. You have the next few months planned, and then all of a sudden, everything was gone. But then it freed up a lot of space for TeamLift. And what we were solving is helping teams work better with each other, helping teams adjust to changes. So it was the perfect time. So we kind of took a bold decision to just go with it and give it our all and focus on it. And it worked out. So I hope that if someone is in a similar situation, this message can kind of push them in that direction. Just give it a try. So I'd say that's what COVID was really helpful with. It just freed up a lot of our time, took out all of the other distractions, and we just had that space to really give it our best.
Thanks for that. I think it brings up an important point of how a lot of companies found that silver lining in such tough times. Would love to get other perspectives on maybe some good things that might have come out of this pandemic and some permanent good changes that might be permanently in effect. So if anybody has any insight on that, I'd love to hear it.
I think there's a bunch of permanent effects, but I think one obvious one to me is that I think the workplace has changed forever, right? I hope that we push through and kind of the other side of this soon from a health perspective. But I think the nature of work has fundamentally changed. I can't imagine many companies that can demand 5 days butts in seats anymore, right? I think we've all proven, like, as much as it can be tiring to do Zooms every day, like, I'll just say it here. I'm sure this team and the rest of the audience probably agrees with that. But I think, but I don't think it'll be, a thing that I think the world goes back to everyone's in the office at all times kind of way. Like, I think we've shown the flexibility and effectiveness we all have in this environment. And so it'll be this interesting dovetail, because I think, like, we're humans. I think a lot of us still value that personal engagement that we actually have with each other when we get the chances to do it in person. But like, how do you dovetail that with the actual, reality, which is, I don't think we need to be, 5 days butts in seats anymore. And so I think that, I don't think it's fully answered, but I can definitively say that has changed forever, right? We've proven it.
I think one thing we're noticing amongst our employees.
I would agree with Andrew. So I'm originally Macedonian. I grew up in Macedonia, and at the moment I'm in Greece. So that's one benefit from just having the world change, where you're not expected to be in one place. I believe in the benefits of seeing the people you work with in person and meeting them in person. We hired a few people during the pandemic, and we hired them without meeting them, which was, I think it would have been very difficult for me before that. But now we learn how to do that. I think many other companies learn how to do that. And there are so many creative technologies now that make connecting with your team fun when it's remote, just using the time you might have in person in a much better way. So I think that we're building an environment and a life that is much more flexible for someone who might want to be studying part-time, or for working moms. The pandemic just accelerated that shift, and some people that would have never been open to it were forced to try it. And then I think some of those people, I'll give you one example. One of my friends leads a wealth management firm, and he would have never gone with working remotely. He's like, no, everyone needs to be in the office. And otherwise, I don't think they'll be working from home. But he got to spend a few months in Miami and just go for a bike ride in the middle of the day and then finish his work later. So I think he started liking it, and that made life flexible, and just everyone can personalize it and get their work done when they think that they're most productive. So one of our team members likes working in the middle of the night, and that's fine. He can work in the middle of the night. There are times when we're all together, but then if that's what works for him, all good. So I'm really happy that that's much more acceptable now.
I think one thing that we're seeing is a need for people to come back for purposeful conversations. So not just coming to the office every day for any particular reason. So if they want to do stand-ups before the vaccine or the testing clinics open, which are first thing in the morning, probably 7:30, no one's going to come to the office for those. So call in for those. If you were working with some folks on the West Coast, no one's going to stay in the office for the 7 to 8 p.m. conversations. When we're working closely with the nurses or superintendents that all happen to happen at nighttime, we're not going to stay in the office for those. I think one thing that we are seeing is that teams really want to come in for strategy sessions. Teams want to come in for bonding. Teams want to come in because there's a reason for them to be in. And so one, as a company, giving us an opportunity to give them a reason to be in. And two, also making the social aspect of being in the office more sociable. If they are only coming in one time per week or once every other week, how can we make the most of it? How can we build in that bonding so that we're more productive in the office, but also remotely?
And just building on and filling in some gaps and some things that I heard, or rather adding to the conversation here, one of the interesting observations I've had while hiring post-pandemic is that on the roles that we had in the team that were very competitive, people were still wanting to work, or they wanted to be in the same city, even if they were working remotely. And so we had a product manager role, we had a customer success role, a lot of competitive, a lot of people in the pipeline. Those who ultimately accepted the offer, they happen to be Boston-based, even though we did a country or nationwide search for these people. And so what I think that really speaks to is that people want the option eventually to be able to meet their coworkers in person and on a much more often basis than once every 3 or 6 months. And so that's been something that we've used in order to modify our outreach and recruiting efforts.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Those were super, super insightful. I think that, like, thinking about the COVID pandemic and all of the bad that has come out of it, what advice would you give to new entrepreneurs to try and navigate this type of environment? Because it is tough to kind of get the resources you need and that sort of thing. So what would you say to somebody that's just starting out in this type of environment?
I would say set up a process that anticipates change, because you'll have change a lot. And if you kind of try to stabilize it, where you decide on something and then this is how your startup functions and this is how you communicate with clients, when there is change, and in an environment like this, there will be. I don't know if you'll ever get a stable environment when that doesn't happen. So implement that as part of your design. Just anticipate it and have a process through which you can respond without creating too much disturbance for your team. So just be ready for it and account for it.
Add in that, and it's a Bozanka. I want to make sure I got that right. Yeah, just building on that, we actually changed the way that we changed our organization structure as a result of the pandemic. Our engineering team, our product team, actually works in more of a pod-like structure rather than this more hierarchical structure that we had before. And we're working in that way to make sure that we can respond to things as they're happening. We've been able to add a ton of features and functionality as a result of having our ears in the ground and then also having these pods focus on individual customers based on their segments and industry. We've been able to do this, and over the last year or so, we've not only been able to deliver a high-level customer value that's unique from our competitors as a result of just listening and being able to respond to things that our larger competitors can't do as quickly, and sort of dancing and more or less dancing around and satisfying our customers. But also we've been able to do this in an industry in which our customers are not expecting that level of support from us. And so what we have now is our new sales. About 6 out of 10 of our new sales come from referrals. And it's because of the organization design that we decided to do as a result of the pandemic.
I would say teams will are becoming much more flexible. I don't think fixed teams will survive or continue existing. Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with everybody here, right? I mean, I think the short of it is, I don't think any of us know what's around the corner, right? Like, I think everything is changing every 2 weeks. And so I think it's important to listen. I think it's just a simple advice, just like, it's hard to make really long bets because you just don't know where the world's going to be. I also think that, like, us as leaders and everybody listening here as leaders, I think it's about setting stage with your team to be flexible themselves, to just remind everybody that we don't know anything because the world keeps changing every 2 weeks. The other side of that, though, is I think increasingly it's more important that we all have to work on alignment, because if everybody's kind of reading the situation constantly, it's pretty likely everyone's reading it differently. So I think and especially we're in a remote situation, so there's like less social cues and less kind of that kind of critical debate that's happening in person. So I think we have to work more actually on alignment than anything, right? So I think those are really important. Like, I think there's a shift, right? Like around how we actually manage and lead together on this stuff. Now, one comment I'll say here is, like, this is Startup Boston, so I think a lot of folks actually on this are actually startup folks, like either just getting going or going. I mean, I would actually say advice for them is that they actually might be really lucky, as twisted as that sounds. But I mean, I think, folks starting companies or getting going, really hitting their kick in this time period are probably in a great place, in the sense that they don't carry the decade of baggage beforehand of how we did things. They get to rethink everything, right? And they don't actually have to turn things off to turn things on. They actually just get to live in this new world. So I think in some ways the advice for those folks is just keep pushing, keep thriving, right? Because you're gonna, like, they're in the new world already, right? And so they arrive at a norm, unlike companies that have been around for a while that need to adapt in that space. So it's less advice, but more being like, just keep doing what you're doing and respond like all startups at different stages are accordingly.
And Andrew, I think that's great. I think one thing that's been helpful for us is no one knows about what's coming in the next 2 weeks. So especially when beginning of July, people were making mask mandates for September, like, everyone was kind of laughing, but like, how do you know what the pandemic is going to be 2 months from now? Similar to the way that kind of hopefully you have your run rate and you know what your startup's going to be in 6 months, but really it's like you're living week by week, day by day, hour by hour. It's startup years is pretty much the same thing as COVID years. 1 week definitely turns into 7 years in that sense. And I think over communicating with your staff, understanding that you can really only predict the next 2 weeks. So sending out biweekly newsletters internally of how things have changed, how your framing has shifted, what you're expecting as far as office, what you're expecting as communication, and really just recognizing that everyone knows we're all in the same place. No one really knows what that's going to be. And people are really comfortable with that level of ambiguity as long as you're communicating.
Definitely. Super interesting conversation. Andrew, I love that point of people that are starting companies these days get to just rethink everything. There really are no rules. And, you guys have definitely risen to the occasion. Is there anything that any of you would have done differently? Rakeem, I can start with you. Is anything you would have changed during your response to COVID?
Off the top of my head, I want to say no, because things have worked out pretty well, but that's over the last year. It's the best response I think we could have come up with in the spot. Just to give you sort of the success around it. So we lost I think we had about $1,000 of revenue. I forget what it went down from, but it was very, very dark days. Anyways, we've been able to get to $1 million of ARR over the course of 12 months. And that was 2 months ago. And so things are still moving really fast. Last quarter, we grew about 5x. Smaller base for sure. At the same time, single quarter, have about 330 employers in our platform. I think, so now I've said all that to begin thinking about things to respond to your question. The thing I would have done differently is once we started to see things working really well for us, actually put the pedal to the metal more. I think we were still hesitant to hire more account executives, hire more customer success people, hire more people because we were concerned that, well, tomorrow may be a different story again. Just given how volatile things are, I think we're a bit much more, I don't want to say conservative is the right word, but we were a bit more metered about how aggressive we wanted to be as a company. And in retrospect, I would want to have been much more aggressive in capitalizing on this opportunity.
Rakeem, I'm gonna just call you on all of us that you shouldn't beat yourself up, because I think this is like hindsight 2020. It's easy, I think, for anybody that survived through here being like, well, I wish we would have done it differently. But in some ways, how the hell would you know, right? Because you go back to April 20. I mean, you got investors out there saying this could be RAP, funding's over, nuclear winter is coming, gear up for 2 years of doing nothing, right? That was one message. And the other sense, you're sorting through, your sales numbers and activity. I think it's, I don't, Stephen, I think it's hard for anybody here. Maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody else, but I think it's hard to say you would have done it differently. So sure, if we magically knew this whole pandemic was coming, boy, would we have done it differently. But that seems like a contrived situation. I think for any company that actually made it through here and is growing now in that stage, come on, everybody made the right choices because you're here, right? And I think it's I think on the edges maybe you could say oh, if I'd known this data or something like that. But I think the best you can in that space. I think I will comment though, I think there was a lot of consternation around how policies are going to change and all of this stuff, everything from PPP and all of these things are here, that I think definitely made it harder for people to figure out how to execute forward. Lots of companies had trouble getting that in place. Again, glad that we actually had help collectively on that space, but I think that kind of stuff made it, that ambiguity even in the programs made it hard for a lot of companies you see out there. But all in all, again, everybody that's here on this, listening to this, you made it through. So I think we should not second guess anything that actually happened in that accordingly. So Rakeem, you're a hero. All of us are on this, right?
Definitely. A lot of beers and and prayers. Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
One thing that we're in a very different spot than most of the folks here, in the sense that we built ourselves to be obsolete. The reason we started CIC Health is so I could go back to my day job at CIC, the real estate company. And so we didn't build the product that would last a year. We used all the duct tape we could, and we invested little time into the product and the development of our solutions because we didn't need the perfect, most customer-friendly platform to be able to do this. It's okay if there are bugs. The engineering concept of the pane versus blockers. Pane was okay and very much expected in the COVID testing space. A year and a half ago, there was no such thing as a COVID testing software, and we had to teach millions of people how to set up strong passwords. And the first people we had to teach that to was 65-plus-year-olds who were all first to get vaccinated in order to see their vaccination result on an online platform, which is a wild concept if you think of that as your first user base. So we contemplated really early on the buy versus build, and we just bought absolutely everything. And we've continued to be able to do all this without an engineer on our team as a healthcare tech-enabled platform. And I think that we would have made tons of different decisions in the summertime. We were June 14th or something like that, we were celebrating our 1-year anniversary party at Fenway and celebrating that COVID was over. And little did we know a month later that we would be back in the game. And I think that we are building to last and we're building to scale. The COVID testing business, while thinking about what comes after COVID with our resources, but very much so knowing that most of our contracts right now are until the end of next summer. So how do we keep the infrastructure in place to be able to scale this to serve as many people as we can with the high quality experience that we expect, not only from us, but from everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Hindsight certainly is 2020. So, again, happy that you guys are all here. We actually have an audience question for the entire panel. Were there any specific resources or inspirations that each of you fell back on to pull through this or past challenging times? Could be anything, books, mentors, family, etc. Just curious as to what each of you fall back on to pull through these times. This sense of resilience is so timely for so many right now. Would love some perspective on that.
I can go with this. I think the biggest thing that has helped me is finding ways to kind of discern between what my gut says and what I'm afraid of. So spending a bit more time with myself sometimes, or making time in the morning or on weekends where I can kind of listen to my intuition or listen to that gut feeling, because there were so many points where you need to make a decision and you don't have enough information, you don't have time to get enough information. So I'd say kind of meditation, for me, sometimes meditation works, sometimes it's just kind of being able to switch off my mind. I've had many answers or good decisions that I have made when I haven't been actively working on something, but I would go do something nice for myself, read a book, and then would be able to figure out a problem that seemed unsolvable before.
Adding to that, I have gotten into meditation, fulfilling being the tech founder and doing all of that. The one that I'm actually doing meditation, it's all about developing concentration, which is a very traditional style of meditation. It's about training the mind. There's a lot of different types of meditation that you can get into. But again, the one I'm doing is about training the mind. And it is specifically about developing rock solid concentration. And through this whole journey, I've been able to go down a path also of self-discovery. And that's been with me throughout the aftermath of the pandemic. But it's also helped me take a very, putting all of what's happening into context of the world and things that we need to do relative to that. And it's been something that has been very helpful in terms of grounding me and helping me work even harder on the business, while also surprisingly also freeing up more free time for me too. So now I've been able to create more time through this practice, and it's been very helpful.
I'll add to the brainstorm here, because I think this is all toolkits that we're all learning here on this. Like, I don't know how many folks actually have little kids, but I've got 6 and 8-year-old girls. And I do think actually family, like I Buzunka said earlier, that how like the fact that we have new flexibility in our lives actually like helps quite a bit. And like I have on my side, it used to be I didn't have weekday dinner with my kids because I wouldn't make it home, until close to their bedtime. But I have dinner with them 7 days a week right now. And I think it's really nice to be able to actually in this moment kind of reincorporate family into kind of the more kind of traditional kind of work lifestyle, which I think it's been a nice counterbalancing effect for me, like helps me stay centered on things, and that you can actually granted Zoom school is hard, right, for everybody, but once we kind of got out of that rhythm, we could go back and it could step out of the back-to-back Zooms and find family there is actually a nice part of it. There's a nice benefit that's been counterbalancing that. I think since we're in the talking about little tips on this stuff too, like I think you both have actually had great ones there, but other ones that for me are actually, because we're all on Zoom all the time and we're online, and in some ways we could be anywhere, so that could also lead to a world where you are literally Zooming for 24 hours straight. I mean, maybe not 24 hours, rhetorically 24 hours a day. But I think in some ways you need to actually also manage your, you could be just, doom scrolling at all times, right? You need to actually kind of manage your own time, whether it's for meditation or carve a moment with your family or read a book or a movie or something like that. I think it's on us to actually keep ourselves sane too. And I think you need to do that, because I think there's a new modality right now. The structure doesn't necessarily help you do that. So we have to kind of carve space for ourselves on those things, wherever that, the space takes you to, right? So I think that's the balance part of it. And then last bit is, I think Cliff originally said resources, inspirations. I don't know, like it's, I remember going through this and like, you're like, is this like 2000? Is this like 08? Right? You keep asking yourself, does this mirror any pattern we've seen before? Clearly not from a health perspective, but from a business perspective, does this mirror any of these? I think the answer now looking back is the answer is no, but you're always looking for templates and patterns, right? Like you're looking for templates and patterns and behaviors around how we made decisions in each of those crises, and were they the right ones? And is this the same crises? You're constantly analyzing both and drawing from what worked in the past, and is it the same situation? Can it work again? Is that part of a toolkit, or is it just like not going to work at all? I think those are all things that you're constantly, or for me, is actually constantly filing through, which is, are we seeing things we've seen before in different ways? Anyways, just thoughts. I think all of us have kind of figured this out as we go along in the last 18 months.
I think Google has this horrible new feature in the calendar where you can see the amount of time you spend in meetings, and the average amount of time. And I don't know if that causes as much anxiety for you guys as it does for me, but it's a ridiculous amount of time. Whenever I can, I try to take meetings on phone calls, so not on video, especially one-on-ones. Take them while walking if you don't need to be in front of your computer. One thing that I was taught probably last October, which has saved me, I think it came from the New York Times when that was sent to the company, but you can actually, if you're using Zoom, hide self-view. And there's something about the psychology of being able to see yourself and how self-conscious you get while talking in front of people or while Zooming. And if you hide that, I think they just showed greater level of happiness and more comfort with the whole entire Zooming process. It feels more natural than looking myself in the top left or top right of the box. I think, Andrew, to your point, this is a very brainstorming session. I'm definitely not one to talk about the best way to cope with everything. Definitely would love to see other ways of doing that. And one thing that has been a game changer for me, and I know it's tough in Boston specifically, I live probably 3 miles away from work, and I try to walk to and from every day. It's 45 minutes. It gets me out. It gets me to clear my mind a little bit, and it makes sure that I'm moving. So if all else, I'm stuck in front of the computer for those other 12 hours, then I get that time to really focus.
Thanks so much. David, I might have you come over and show me how to hide that speaker view so I can get that rolling. So thanks so much. We actually had an audience member chip in with this question, had an interesting perspective. He said that, in his perspective, having advisors and mentors who have lived through business launches is kind of his most critical resource that he uses for these massive boulders like COVID and otherwise. Being able to ask, like, would you recommend dealing with how would you recommend dealing with this when they're not usually emotionally attached to the project is such a massive asset to have. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts regarding that, or agree, disagree, but I think it's a very
I'm just going to chime in on here. I think it's great, and it's a good point. And I think the one that I think we actually haven't said is actually the existence of this group here as an extension of that. I find actually talking with other companies and getting that kind of if you can find those networks that and people that actually want to talk about their situations, it can be help. Because frankly, all of us are going through similar things in our respective businesses. They might be different industries, different scales, but we're all tackling, especially we talk about health crisis, office norms, all of these things are things we're all going through. So I think advisors for sure, but I forgot earlier, I actually think that other peers in this space, I think have been super valuable, right? Everything from hey, have you guys changed what the go to office plans are and when have you moved, to hey, what have you dealt with in this situation? I think those things are actually really, really valuable, because the reality is, back to my earlier point, we haven't seen this crisis before, right? So there are bits of it that end up being oh, hiring's a challenge, or you have some new sales opportunities, and those can parallel before you can ask advisors. But I actually think all of us are game timing this. So for me, I think actually having a collection of other companies that are in peer-wise situations, or maybe just a click ahead, can actually help solve this stuff, right? And examples, even things like facilities, at that time, we didn't have a lot of facilities people, but we had enough friends that had companies that do have facilities. And so asking them hey, what are you guys doing when you have more resource and money than we do right now? Can you teach us along the way? So I think I'm, back to things like Startup Boston, I think these networks are really valuable, right? Because they can be another place where you can get that advice and help from there. I know that wasn't exactly Ben's comment here, but just kind of building on that, because I looked at the screen and I'm yeah, these people, right?
Definitely. And Andrew, just to jump in, it's storied, such a valuable aspect that we've had is a Slack group with all the founders that we have profiled. And it's just kind of given a network, this network effect, a place where people can come and ask questions and get totally unbiased, real life perspective and answers. And we found that to be our kind of silver lining in COVID. This Slack group has been such a valuable resource. So totally agree with your point about using resources like this to kind of move forward. It's been great. We actually have another question in the chat. Any book recommendations from any of you that have influenced you or how you've built your company?
I like The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That one was helpful for me.
Is that the Ben Horowitz book?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the music he always talks about there too. Yeah.
I think anything Adam Grant has definitely been able to help us take us through this time. Angela Duckworth's work on grit, although a little bit contested in the past few years, is always just a good way to do it. And you don't need to read all of these books. A one-page synopsis will do for absolutely all of them, but not groundbreaking things, just always good reminders or mantras to get you through.
I'll put a third vote down for The Hard Things About Hard Things. It's one of those must-read books. It's pretty good. It's really, really good, actually. To throw out there a non-sort of startup book, one of my favorite books is a book called How to Solve It. It's by a former Stanford mathematician, professor there. And at the end of the book, there's a ton of heuristics about how to solve different math problems. And it's one of those books that has, going on Amazon, has 10 or 20,000 reviews or so, but it's a classic. Those same heuristics that you can use to solve math problems can also be used to solve problems in your business. And I've been able to extend those over to the business, and it's been very helpful for me personally.
Is it by George Polia?
Yep, I think he's a Hungarian man. Yeah.
I'm adding it to my to-read list. Awesome.
Please tell me how you like it afterward.
I'm taking notes from you all, right? I always need is the answer. You guys reminding me. Actually forgot about the. It's been a while since I read the Ben Horowitz book on this one. For what it's worth, I'm actually reading The Advantage right now because we're kind of getting ready for some kind of team alignment stuff and just focus.
We should speak, Andrew. Maybe we can help you out with it. You can be one of our.
Great. Looking forward to that. See, this is the networks. I actually think that it's also good sometimes to be like not doing business books. I think business books can be a bit much sometimes. And so like ways that you can kind of get out of your head of those things is always just a nice shift to be able to get back to some fun things. So it's I don't know. I've for me, like I like cooking actually is one of my kind of respites in this space. And side project is I've been we're stuck at home anyway, so I've been doing a lot of barbecuing. So I've been working on my smoked brisket. So I picked up Aaron Franklin's. He's a Austin-based barbecue guy, kind of like the guy who kind of did the contemporary Austin style brisket. So I've been working on my brisket game. So that's a book that is not a business book, but it's definitely been entertaining for me around how to work on my smoking game.
I'll wait for my invite, Andrew.
Hey, anytime. This crew is welcome to be here. Like it's a 9-pound brisket, so we got to work through it. All right.
For sure.
That is a dangerous proposition. I think I know what I'm doing after this.
I'm definitely biased, but from a healthcare perspective, Michael Lewis's book on premonition, kind of how we got into this mess and how we're getting out of it, and just all the incredible learnings from it. It was so incredibly therapeutic, and I would say my favorite book of the past year and a half, just from a place to laugh, cry, and also just smack my head against the wall.
I mean, they pushed that book really fast, right? Because it's talking about stuff that's like still not solved right now. And I was like, whoa, it went through the publishing sequence much faster than you would have thought. I thought you were going to jump in being like, from a healthcare position, I'm not sure you all should be eating brisket so much. I was like,
oh, no, I'm the first to come over.
All right, good. You're still invited. Yeah.
Thanks. I apologize. I do have to jump a few minutes early. So the other speakers here, thank you so much. And I appreciate being involved in Startup Boston.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Your insights really appreciated. And just for the remaining panelists, we have another question kind of going on the theme of networking here. How do you build your relationships during this time with customers, founders, prospective employees, etc.? How do you go about it?
I would say one important difference is pre-COVID, you go to an event and you kind of randomly meet people. It's difficult to do that online. If you just reach out to someone, hey, I want to network. Like, I don't usually respond to those requests. People don't respond to those requests. So you need to, well, at least for me, what has worked is I need to understand who I want to meet and why I want to meet them. So not just randomly go and meet people. I think the serendipity is kind of gone, but also not, because you meet someone and then they might introduce you to someone else who could be a valuable connection or partnership for you. For me, it's been, okay, who do I want to meet? And then why do I want to meet them? Do I know someone who can introduce me? Or maybe I can reach out. If I do a cold reach out, I say specifically why that person and why it would make sense for us to speak.
I think, by the way, I think Hallie asked this question. So hi, Hallie. It's good to hear from you. Just building on this, like I actually think like Zoom meeting people is really hard, right? So I think you're talking about like needing intentionality about it. You actually have to put effort into it. I think you can't just, scoot into a networking event and bump into people. I think you have to be much more conscious about it. So to your point, like you have to know who you're going to meet. Like I'm agreeing completely with everything you're saying, and doing that. And actually have to go out of your way. I do think if you feel safe and you have someone that's comfortable, like I actually think you end up relishing much more of the face-to-face experience when you do have the chance, whether you're grabbing a beer, having a lunch or something like that, or even taking a hike together or walking around the river. I think those are all things that actually mean much more so. So if you can, I think whenever, and whether you're actually just networking or on a kind of sales front, if you can do it, because I think it's just so scarce and rare these days that I think it feels really good when you get a chance to do it. The last bit I'll say is like on the awareness of and consciousness of this is that I think even in a Zoom setting, you have to really lean into it if you want to, because I think when you're in person, we pick up so much of this, body language and engagement and like there's, there's a physicality about the way you interact together as humans. And I think you lose some of it in Zoom. So in order to build that trust and relationship, you actually have to lean into it, maybe be a little more vulnerable. You have to force the conversation a bit more because it won't naturally flow. It's too easy for the Zoom to end and to be caught in our backgrounds and all of these things. I think and I think that's an attitudinal shift, but I think that's one where you actually have to say to Rakeem, hey, like, I want to build this relationship. Let's figure out how to talk. Like, let's talk together about this whole thing. Because if you don't, you can just skate by 30 minutes later being like, okay, I seem like a nice guy, right? But you don't actually know each other any better. Whereas I think if you're face-to-face, you pick up all this other stuff to figure out, oh, they're your people, and you kind of click in that way. So I think we have to be extra, emotive or extra, like, leaning into the conversation, I think, in a digital setting, because it's because the technology does not lead us to that alone. Right?
Yeah, very quickly on this one. I happen to have hired a chief of staff immediately before the pandemic, before the shutdown. And one of the things I asked him to do was to help me find new advisors and mentors. And what we found was that people just happen to have much more time during this time. And so we were able to meet, I would say, at least 2 or 3 dozen people, other founders, other executives, founders of companies that we want to sell to, past executive companies that we want to sell into. We've been able to meet a lot of people, perhaps 2 or 3 times more than if there weren't the pandemic. And it's because he helped coordinate all of that for me. It was very helpful.
Thank you all. We're quickly running out of time. This hour has gone so fast. We actually have just, real quickly, last question from the audience. What's the best strategy when engaging an idea that you previously have put down for a few years? Anybody want to jump in on that one?
Don't be alone in it. Involve as many people as you can. Speak to potential clients. Find someone to work with you on it. Just involve other people. I think that's the best way. Because otherwise you can go into overthinking it and then nothing happens.
Yeah. My advice, if it's B2B, a B2B business, is don't quit your day job. You can build a B2B business on the side in addition to your full-time 9-to-5 job. And then once it starts to build traction, then that's when you quit. B2C, it does help to sort of go all in, but you do not have to do that with a B2B business.
And I think on this brainstorm on this one, which is, I think, bring your team into it, right? Because if you can have trying to will it yourself as a solo person, I think is often hard, right, to do things. So it doesn't mean you have to bring your whole team in, but have a partner in trying to actually help move things forward, at least challenge it. So you're not just kind of pulling it out of thin air by yourself. I think it's important, and it's tough in this environment to kind of will things in this magical way. But I agree with everything everybody said here. I think it's last bit, make space for it. I think, like we said earlier, we're all in this 2 week by 2 week crisis. I think it's very hard if your goal is to change place. I think it's very hard to do it unless you make space for it, because you're going to be constantly under the urgency of these things, and you need to kind of give yourself constructs to kind of free you and your team to be able to do that.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up here. Again, thank you to all the panelists for taking the time out to walk us through some of the trials and tribulations of running a company through COVID. Super inspiring stuff that you guys have all shared, and congratulations to all of you on building such great companies. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and the organizers here. I think this is a crew. I think we have a good community here, right? And I think however we can actually support each other on this stuff.
Great. Yeah, thank you. It's my 3rd time doing this, and every year it does actually get better, even through post-pandemic. Congrats, guys.
It's my first time this year. It was a pleasure. Would love to come back.
Yeah, just want to say thank you again to all the panelists here. So really appreciate the commitment. Obviously, as the audience knows, this is a volunteer basis. And so for them to take time out of their weeks to even for an hour, is a huge commitment for any founder, whether they're a first time or a serial founder. So thank you to everyone here, David as well, who had to jump off early. Obviously, as you can see, there's other commitments that each person here has. So from the Startup Founder Organizer team, I want to thank all of you from the heart. And Stephen, thank you so much for moderating a great panel.
Thanks for having me. I'll definitely be back. This is my first time, and it was awesome.
Excellent. So for our audience, if you're looking to jump into to see what's on the agenda next, you can obviously navigate to the top left agenda tab, and you can see what we have for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. And we hope to see you at the next session. Thank you so much, guys.